What is Landeed? Why the need for it?
Think of Landid is just like you have a blue tick mark next to your social media profile to say that it's authenticated. We want to do the same thing to properties.
How do you procure the data or the documents that's required for each real estate? Like, how do you ensure that you have all of it?
It is a hybrid approach. We deal a lot with governments. There's not one singular conclusive department you can say, this is the department that verifies and validates my ownership. Right? So we work with all these different departments at different varying levels. And other times we have to go offline and procure that document if we have to.
You can now create also documents, like fraudulent documents easily.
Creating fraudulent documents is still very difficult. What is easy, when you tell an Indian VC for some reason that my round is about to close then, they don't believe you. I don't know why.
Okay.
And they also don't believe you when you tell them that I don't want money right now. If you continue to maintain your shop on my property and try to negotiate a deal with me, I consider that extortion. So either remove it or I will bulldoze your shed. I had a feeling you wouldn't, so I bulldozed it.
Oh.
Then police came, there was this whole situation. Karnataka has one of the best registration systems. A lot of states have tried to implement it, but they haven't. And I think the good thing about this is...
So is it possible that despite procuring all the documents and providing everything, tomorrow a person or a customer might just come saying, no, but this land actually belongs to me?
Land disputes make up 2/3 of India's civil cases, but no one talks about how broken the system really is until now. Bureaucracy, missing paperwork, encroachments. Buying property in India is more gamble than guarantee. But one startup is trying to bring order to this chaos and a blue tick to your land titles. In this episode of Point Break, we speak with Sanjay Mandava, two-time Y Combinator founder and the driving force behind Landeed, India's fastest and most comprehensive property title search engine. From tackling bureaucratic black holes and breaking illegal encroachments to giving a brutal reality check to Indian VCs, this conversation is sharp, honest, and unapologetically bold. Let's dive in.
I have with me Sanjay Mandava, CEO and founder of Y Combinator-backed startup Landeed. Hello, Sanjay. Thank you for being here. Sanjay, I want to start with what is Landeed? Why the need for it? How did it all begin?
Yeah, think of Landid. We typically say it's the fastest and most comprehensive property title search engine in India. Mm-hmm. And what we're essentially trying to do is just like you have a blue tick mark next to your social media profile to say that it's authenticated, we want to do the same thing to properties to tell you that titles and the ownership of that property is clear. Now, people might be wondering why this is an issue. A lot of younger people don't deal with it. But in essence, 2/3 of all court cases in India, civil court cases, deal with land or real estate disputes. Mm-hmm. So that's millions of cases. But according to RBI, more than 80% of household wealth in India is in land or real estate or property for most households in India. So it's a lot of assets, but also a lot of liability. Mm-hmm. So essentially what you can do with Landed is put in an address and we'll be able to pull up all the requisite government documentation to prove ownership or to apply for a loan.
All right. And so how did it begin? How was your journey when you first started it?
Yeah. I came to India predominantly and largely for the reason that both my parents were doctors in US and they had bought additional parcels of land in India to come back to India and build a chain of hospitals. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, one of those land parcels that was large, after my father passed away, one of the politicians decided to come and try to encroach on it. I'm the oldest son, so for me, I felt it was a bit of a responsibility, but also a lot of naivety. I think that helps in doing startups. So that's what brought me back to India. Mm-hmm. And I was like, who are these guys? I'm sure it cannot possibly be as broken as I know it is to be today. That was my original, idea. But I often tell people that I was probably very naive and unusually arrogant for what it took to understand India. But now I'm a lot more humble, but I'm also a lot more confident about the work that I can do.
So entering into a segment like real estate and properties, I mean, the data is fragmented and a lot of nuances to it. So why did you get into it, and how do you cater that aspect of it?
Yeah. So in one of our other lands, while I was in away in COVID, usually the typical practice when you have a decent land holding in a particular area is you fence it up,
Mhm.
put a name board on it, and build a shed and put a watchman
Yeah.
to look it over.
Correct.
And during COVID, we had one of these land parcels in Tamil Nadu. And so usually when you have multiple land parcels, you pay one agency and the agency manages each of the security guards at your place. So we'd been paying this agency, and we hadn't been noticing anything. And so one of my friends, that's another, close by landowner, tells me, hey, somebody built something on your land. Did you sell it? And I was like, wait, what? And I found out somebody had erected a fruit shop on it and was selling. So I called up the agency. What we found out was the security guard that they had employed had ran away to his hometown during COVID.
Okay.
But this guy didn't tell us, and the agency was still taking money but not paying that guy. And they hadn't appointed a new one. So during this time, somebody had come out and illegally put up a fruit shop.
Mhm.
So when I was going through that process, I went there and I said, hey, this is legal. What's going to happen? He said, we're some innocent people just trying to make a living. Can you make a exception for us or that kind of thing? So I said, look, if you remove that store and come back and sit down with me, and I'll find a way to make it work for you, I'll consider that, charity.
Mhm.
Now, if you continue to maintain your shop on my property and try to negotiate a deal with me, I consider that extortion. So either remove it or I will bulldoze your shed.
Mhm.
And I had a feeling you wouldn't, so I bulldozed it.
Oh.
Then police came. There was this whole situation, and they said, "What is the proof that you own?"
Mhm.
And so obviously, I had the sale deed and showed it to them. They said that's not enough, and an entire list of documents was sent. And so my team had been running around trying to collect these documents from various departments, though it should be quite clear from the documents that we had. You can always ask for more documents in India. That's a learning in everything that you go and do, even with KYC. Always more documents, right? So when we were going through the search, I was like, why is there not a digital way to pull these?
Mhm.
And when I checked on this earlier, India didn't have the rails built for it. Now it did, probably because of COVID acceleration. A lot of documents are digitized, and so that's good.
Yeah.
And so when I bumped across this one company that I thought was supposed to be doing work in this space, and I couldn't use it intuitively, and I couldn't find a solution. So that's how we came to building this and discover the problem. And now we are in 24 states. We interact or touch on a daily basis more than 128 different agencies around the country.
Mhm.
We have close to 6 million downloads, and we've run almost 15 million title searches. So in the last 2.5 years, that makes us, I believe, the largest in the space.
And how do you procure the data or the documents that's required for each real estate? Like, how do you ensure that you have all of it and
Yeah.
kind of help your customers get it?
It is a hybrid approach. We deal a lot with government, and we're happy to work with them at state levels and many areas. Sometimes they're open data sets, and other times they're offline documents that are, I say that we're in the antiques business. The 4-dimension time being a very important part of our business. A lot of startups are thinking about what they can build into the future. But one of our core parts of our business is how far back we can go in the past to retrieve a valuable document, right? So it's always a mix. So if you look at our states within our app, each state will look different than the other. It's not like you have a standardized interface. The reason for that is we find that real estate in India is hyper-localized because first and foremost, it's a state subject. It's not a central government subject. So that, and within the state, it's handled by multiple departments. There's not one singular conclusive department you can say, this is the department that verifies and validates my ownership, right? So we work with all these different departments at different varying levels. Some we're very deeply intertwined with, integrated with. Others, we use their data sets that they make available. And other times we have to go offline and procure that document if we have to.
So is it possible that despite procuring all the documents and providing everything, tomorrow a person or a customer might just come saying, no, but this land actually belongs to me, though you're saying it's this.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have these kind of discrepancies. Right?
So it's not can, it's inevitable,
Yeah.
right? So I do thousands of searches every hour
Mhm.
at this point, and it just keeps on increasing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things to understand is that in order for someone to say that this property is mine, but the department is reflecting wrongly,
Yeah.
that in itself sometimes is not the whole truth. Because first of all, we have to understand the basis of India's titling system.
Mhm.
So predominantly in India, for safe titling, there are two methods. One is a public sector approach and one is a private sector approach. The public sector approach is called conclusive titling.
Mhm.
So Australia has a good system of this. It's called torrents.
Okay.
UK has this, Singapore has this. Basically, in the conclusive titling system, what happens is, let's say I'm about to buy a house from you and you're the seller. The Australian government or the UK government would sit in between
Mhm.
and say, look, Vandana, who wants to sell the property, is actually the owner of the property and therefore she's able to sell.
Mhm.
There's a single department doing this.
Got
So when I buy that property and that central validator has said this property is authenticated, once my purchase is complete, I get a single title deed giving me ownership over that property.
Mhm.
The second method is title insurance, which was introduced in US almost 130 years ago. So at this point, 150. And basically what title insurance does is, a title insurer sits in between. He checks that you are actually the owner of the property, and looks at the lineage of the property documentation going back several years. And then when I purchase the property, the lender mandates that I purchase title insurance up to the value of the property.
Mhm.
Essentially, what this means is, in case there's a title defect,
Yeah.
the title insurer will give me that money or redeem that money or give me financial sources to fight that case in court. So they're validating that everything is clean,
Mhm.
right? And so in that transaction, I will not get a loan in US
Mhm.
if I do not purchase title insurance from the lender. The reason is the lender is also purchasing title insurance in that transaction up to the value of the loan that they gave you. So all the parties are, protected in that case. In India, we don't have a pure play title insurer, because for the best practice of title insurance to work in all countries, it's called a monoline insurance, which means that if you do title insurance, you cannot do any other forms of insurance. We do not even have the regulatory framework for a monoline title insurer in India.
Okay.
So we have to go and get a general insurance license. And whatever India has created, a lot of these insurers would most definitely not want to give up their other lines of business to do title insurance. So there's a lot of roadblocks. A lot of people have put a lot of roadblocks. Incumbents, sometimes, actors that don't understand this very well. So India hasn't adopted that. The other method is conclusive titling, which means the state must insure those titles. In the UK's, Australia example, Indian government doesn't want to do that. So we have something called presumptive titling. What that means is essentially says the Indian government, hey, look, I have no claim as to who is the owner of this property.
Mhm.
I don't know if Vandana is the owner. That responsibility falls upon the buyer, me, to do the due diligence in India.
Got it.
So a lot of people assume the sale deed is a form of title. It is one form, but in the legal framework in the Indian system, a sale deed is nothing but a record of two parties having engaged in a transaction. It does not confer ownership automatically. So that is why you see fraudulent properties have multiple sale deeds just for one property. So we haven't really taken systematic changes to make fixes, but I hope we will.
And also now I think, so digitization you were talking about.
Yeah.
So that has actually helped the whole process, or it's bringing up newer challenges. Like for example, you can now create also documents, like fraudulent documents easily, and then it's available online.
Yeah, I mean, creating fraudulent documents is still very difficult. I mean, what is easy about it is if you know some local, government operator, a TESL or somebody that you're willing to work with. But even that is also very difficult for them. But people will take risks if the reward is worth it. And so that's what happens. Now, I think when you talk about digitization, I think that is the DLIRMP, which is the digitization program by the Indian government they've taken on. They've taken this program on, I think, 2 or 3 times now. And it's been going on for 30 to 40 years. All we've been able to do so far is basically take whatever we have as maps and put them on a pixelated screen. So it does not confer, validate, or authenticate any sort of ownership. Because for a single property in India, there are sometimes 3 to 6 different departments involved in identifying that. So registration department in Karnataka, for instance, you get your EC, that's where you do your registrations and your sale deeds, inheritance wills and all of that. Then you have a revenue department, and then of which BBMP, which are the municipalities that help you with your property tax, BESCOM. So they deal with the more fiscal nature of your property, right? And the interesting thing about this, all states have these, and all of them recognize a property's existence, but sometimes even have different addresses for the same property. So it's not like you can put in a certain address and pull up all the data. Like I'll make it even simple. Like if people try to use, the government websites, one of the things that happens is we digitize all of this, but where's the accessibility? Meaning, if I asked you, Vandana, do you know the survey number of the building you're sitting in? What would you tell me? And we might be in our house for years, but if I asked you the survey number, you wouldn't know, or PID number. And this is the interesting thing. So when you go to and try to do a title search, they ask you survey number, and you're scratching your head and you're wondering where the hell the survey number is. So we build things like Find My Survey Number. You put in an address and we pull up. So we had to build our own mapping infra for that. It's one thing to digitize, but I think it's a totally different thing to make it accessible to the common man and user.
So how has the adoption been, like, from your customers? Do they find this process more, trustworthy, and do they have confidence in the whole system?
Yeah, I think our number of searches, our number of downloads in the time that we've been around, and I think our leadership in this space is a testament to how much our customers trust us. We have a lot of power users, and we have banks and NBFCs that use us today. So it's not only consumer. We have now, because of the growth, we've had to divide the company into 2 segments now. Now we have a consumer arm and an enterprise arm. So unless we were able to build that trust, and we have 0 churn on our enterprise arm in over a year since we started that. So basically, once we have a customer, they almost never leave. And I think that's a lot to do with both the type of people that we hire and the customer delight score that we try to maintain. And also the fact that we've taken on some really hard challenges, technical challenges. I'm not even talking about the normal challenges of a startup. I'm talking about the technical infra to work with the government. The mechanisms that we need to have in place to work with the bureaucracy. I think these are very, very hard things to solve. And these are not some things that you just throw money at and say, oh, we raised a bunch of money, we're going to throw it at that. We've taken very calculated, I would say, strategies in terms of how we go about this. Anywhere from hiring from, like, let's say Adani or, one of the infrastructure companies who have to deal a lot with regulation, to having best in class in terms of technical talent and bringing in people from even outside of India, if we believe that it's necessary to be able to push the needle forward. I think these things are very hard to replicate unless you have a culture that really prizes, innovation and pushes forward.
Which was my next question on the bureaucracy bit. You would be dealing with a lot of that, right? So how do you kind of navigate that?
It's a very interesting market. Because it's a state subject, we interact with all levels of bureaucracy, and I think it is not so much as how do we deal with that. I think a lot of people view bureaucracy in India as a challenge. And when they hire government affairs or public policy people, lazening, compliance, what they mean is, especially in later stage startups and particularly startups in India, they're trying to keep government out of their way. They're not wanting anything from the government. They're like, just make sure you don't, pass some regulation without consulting with us. We're not plugged in, or we're not taken for a surprise. In our case, we actively seek to work with the government. So it's a very collaborative exercise for us. And so in that respect, in most cases, they understand what they're trying, what we're trying to do. And they know how big of a problem it is. See, like something we all know, ride hailing is very important for mobility in the city. No matter how many changes you make, people are still going to want that. And I think sometimes making decisions about that might not have high clarity, because regulator might have a different opinion about it than a founder and the customer. In our case, I think the regulators and the bureaucracy have been hearing about land problems for so long, and in some cases, they themselves are the victim. So they know the problem well. So when we go and try to speak to them, they know that we come with first principles approach, and usually we already have a working product with a lot of traction by the time we go speak to them. So they cooperate with us quite well. We look at them as another customer. In our case, we're not trying to keep them off our back. We want to work with them. We proactively go forward to them, and we sit down with them. We discuss, but with the implication that they know that we will move irrespective, and we will move fast. And we want to work with them to move fast. So I think they understand that. But it's never a straightforward thing. And it's not what founders dream about when they first start a company. But you don't think about what's hard. You just think about what needs to get done. And that's what we do.
Okay. And so you said you're in 24 states?
Yeah.
So is it a mandate that you would have to, say, speak to the government of each of those states while you're working on your customer base?
It depends on the level of penetration. All states are not equal to us. A lot of our growth, a lot of where we build is very much dependent on the economic vibrancy of that state and that city. Cities usually drive that state. It's not the state that is driving that city. And for us, we're a very urban, I would say we're urban focused company. We are not, it's very unfair for me to sit here and say like, look, hey, I really care about farmers. I want to go help them. That's why I built Landeed. That's true. That's like not true at all. That's why even we don't typically go out there and say even though we can raise money from impact funds or, social, funds, we don't do that, because we're very clear that this is a urban company, and this is for a company where people can pay and are not price sensitive. This is a very convenient, highly convenient tool, and we expect urban users in the city to be able to use it very easily and pay for it. That's our market, right? And I don't think we should shy away from kind of owning that. So yeah, I think that in terms of like urban infrastructure and all of that, there's a lot of changes I think we can make. Yeah.
Got it. And from all these states that you've operated from, do you have any personal observation or something interesting that you see, like the real estate market in this city is very peculiar when you look at something else?
Are you talking about the government systems or like generally the real estate market?
Why don't you answer both?
So one thing is very interesting. Interesting tidbit. I don't think your users would care that much, but I would say I think Karnataka has one of the best like registration systems. It's the only state that has this slot booking system and registration that is done with digital first and then done at the office. A lot of states have tried to implement it, but they haven't. And I think the good thing about this is they're going to have a much clearer vision about what's happening in Bangalore with PID numbers and all of that. So Bangalore is interesting in that respect. I think in terms of real estate growth, I'm extremely optimistic. I can't take short-term decisions, but I would say that over the long horizon, broadly speaking, I'm still very, very optimistic about the south and the west of India. And I'm very optimistic, particularly in Hyderabad as well. And because the city, the way that they've done the urban infra planning is probably one of the best I've seen around the country. And they have something very interesting, which I call positive inward migration. Essentially, a lot of the talent that's coming into the city as it's growing is white collar talent, is knowledge workers that are coming in. So it's not always just labor class that's coming into the city to help out and grow it. And the reason that this is important is when you have a certain type of immigration that has an impact on your crime rate. And so it's also one of the most surveilled cities in the world. So it's not atypical to see a lot of women, young people walking around the city in financial district, let's say around 2, 3 a.m., feeling completely safe. So I think that those are very important ingredients in India. Like women's safety is a very important thing in Indian cities. And like everybody talks about, I see a lot of founders also talk about how there should be more women in workforce participation. Well, you're not going to have that workforce participation by women if she doesn't feel safe, until leaving the office before, or after 5 p.m.
Okay.
Right? Like, if your company is work in office and ass in the seat, work hard, and she has to leave early because she doesn't feel safe outside, you're not going to get labor participation from women at an increased clip. So in order for you to increase that, you need to increase safety. And when you have more diversity in the workplace and you have better absorption of talent, you're just going to build great cities.
Okay.
And I think one thing that people misunderstand in India is there's some kind of like romanticism about these villages and towns. I think they're nice, and maybe that's somewhat of a leftover from Gandhian era of looking at rural India. But trust me, great countries are not built without great cities. And I often give this example, like the top 3 cities in US, which are New York City, LA, and Chicago, have a higher GDP than our entire country, just 3 cities. So this is the power of cities. And so we should really focus the next 2 decades in India on building great human cities and making it traversable, making it accessible, having street side commerce. You feel safe taking your family out. I think that's the major innovation India needs to take.
Got it. Yeah, perfect. Now I want to talk about the AI and the tech piece of how is AI integrated in Landid? Is it just a use case that you have, or you actually have actual results, use cases that say that, what this AI is working for?
Yeah. I think interestingly, I wouldn't say I'm talking a lot about our company. I don't want to plug it in too much, but I think we're actually one of the people in the forefronts in this space. I think one thing that people don't realize very intuitively is you need a lot of data sets. And in real estate, lineage of this is important. Like we care about our family name or where we come from. You need to care a lot about that regards to documents, and how far they go back is very important. And one of the interesting things is across families and across generations, one of the best preserved human documentation is always ownership documentation. So like something interesting, like for instance, we have a lot of vernacular languages in India. And a lot of the older documents are handwritten Tamil, Kannada, and Telugu. Let alone us being able to read it. I don't think we are even able to like speak like that today when we speak our language colloquially, right? So we're building this, and we tried to get this off the shelf. If anybody's built that model, we've looked at Servam, we looked at Crewtrim, they didn't have it. Quality is not very good. And in a lot of cases, we see still like established players like OpenAI or Cloud still being better than the Indian labs.
Why is that? That's very strange.
I'm not sure. I think some languages are more better or fine-tuned than others. But there are many instances where established, in some respects, I think even DeepSeek has been slightly better. So slightly disappointing, but I think we're well on our way to doing a better job of it. So we had to build a lot of these in-house. And so that means we had to get NLP, ML, AI engineers. We had to sometimes bring talent from outside of India to be able to do this. But yeah, so one of the first things, if you type about us, you'll see that we were the first in India to launch a AI property title analyzer. So you take a document, you put it in, and it generates a legal opinion for you, or a legal opinion for you. We were the first in India to do that. Now today, a lot of people, it's been trained on so much data that it's probably the best model of its kind. So one of the things I say is that I think model competency or capability will be flatlined or commoditized fairly quickly. You can't keep going up with the models. Like some model is now some good at something else. Now you have SLM, small language models that are more finely tuned. But I think having the best data set, having the width and depth in data set, and then having the talent to clean it up properly, and then having the talent to build a stack on top of that is very, very important. And I think very few companies probably have the full stack approach to it. In fact, we have a division within our company for geospatial engineering because mapping is not done properly in India. The last time we did an all India survey was more than 100 years ago. So a lot of these things we had to build. One of these land use maps that we've taken from Mumbai, half the locations were in the sea according to the government. Now we had to use ML, a lot of that, to clean it up, bring it back on. So now you can put an address and pull up a property title with a Google Maps address. These were very important things, and they were all machine assisted. And this is not something new to us. We've been doing this, obviously because YC, OpenAI, that ecosystem's built for us. We've been working on this for almost 1.5, 2 years now. We had something called Land GPT, where you can go and just ask it questions and it'll help you with tax and guidance when it comes to real estate. And now we are working with enterprises, in fact, some banks, to integrate our model to help them speed up their diligence.
Right. And I think there are a lot of even these space tech startups which are providing these geospatial data. So is that collaboration also something that you might explore in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a collaboration that we'd like to explore. I think we've also I looked at a couple of possible acquisitions in that space as well, mergers. But I think that a lot of them, their data is very much useful for enterprises. It could be hedge funds, like somewhere I worked at, like looking at crop changes, weather pattern changes. It could be banks just trying to get an area size. But unless you're able to attach a high economic action to it, I find that data in India is not valued the same way as it is in other countries. I don't know how to describe this, but I often say that India is broadly broken just into two industries. It's not BFSI, pharma, IT, or oil and gas. I think India can be broken down into either you're in the who you know business or what you know business. And data is usually in the what you know business. And I think a lot of people prize who you know business more. Who do I know? How do I get the contract? Can I make a call to solve that problem? Whereas tech companies are in the what you know business, and we think data is an edge. But in our space, there's many data providers, but you don't see people using data-backed decisions to make real estate decisions in India. It is a lot about how do I deal with the bureaucracy? How do I deal with the compliance? How do I deal with the legality? So in our space, it's lesser important. But I can imagine for other people, probably with financial implications, and are looking at change of a particular asset over time, this would be important. But I think satellite company just doing imagery, that's not helpful in real estate to a large extent.
All right. Sanjay, now I want to understand a bit about your journny. You're a
Sure.
2X Y Combinator founder. So can you tell me a bit about that? How did that happen? And your previous startup as well, if you could just talk about that.
My previous startup was called GoLorry. So that was, you can think of it as Uber for trucks in India, lorry. So we operated across India. We worked with HUL, ITCs, a lot of these corporates. I think I loved running the business. I think it's fascinating. And I still don't think it's being run and done in a great way. But I think I just wasn't a good founder for fundraising at that time. I had some notions that I needed to get rid of in how I thought about fundraising and venture funding, how I build my teams. how the culture is in India. I think that took some adjustment. And what I mean by that is, I think the technology adoption, when I first started that company, like seeing phones with double SIMs and even triple SIMs was a commonality.
Mhm.
There was no national provider. This was pre-Geo that was providing good 3G network across India.
This is which year?
This was around 2016,
Okay.
2015, right?
All right.
And so now, we took this approach of actually giving out smartphones to truck drivers
Mhm.
with the app pre-installed. That's how confident we were about the economic value. But what we found out is it has very different use cases than in Uber. And everybody had this research about why trucking was inefficient. There were a couple of other people, one of them is public, so kudos for them for representing our industry. There was the Rivigo,
Mhm.
But we knew the industry wasn't really doing the hard things to fix.
Mhm.
I think it was focused a lot on GTV, GMV,
Mhm.
truckloads. Then they, moved into financing because it became lighter. There's a lot of implicit things that happen in the background in India. Like we had to deal with unions.
Mhm.
And I looked at unions very differently than my peers. My peers often worked with them.
Mhm.
I believe that it was not healthy capitalism, and that if they were being unfair to my own user base, I will break them.
Mhm.
So I've had to break unions.
Okay.
And so this was a very localized, I would say, I think we took a more militaristic approach to some of these, to say that we don't negotiate with unions. We treat them similar to terrorists if they're being, unfair, because all of them start with good intentions. These unions, it's usually some truck owners that didn't, were not getting treated well with a factory or a big company there. They do need it. But then over time, what happens is you have slow corruption. People placing their trucks in front of others, and people not allowing trucks from other areas, like within their own state, to come in and ply it, artificially inflating the price, and demanding terms. And you see few people getting wealthy, right? So I think startups that operated on that and said, look, we just want our GMV and didn't care about loss making, set examples in the market that even today you will not be able to overcome, because your own venture capital funding might have made these unions stronger, which were not healthy for the market in the first place. And then now, a lot of us have probably sold our books, our contract books. We were just like, it's not worth it if we have to do this warfare. And there's also, again, bureaucracy and regulation involved in that. A lot of them are, have political things in the background while they're running in that local area. We didn't care. We operated and thought in what was best for my customers. That was my factories and my truckers. That made us more precise in how we went after markets. We probably built the only profitable trucking operations in India. But it's not something that I was proud to say that I built after 5 to 6 years to give to my team. It was becoming so ops heavy that innovation was getting slowed. And that's not a company that I wanted to, and that I promised my two co-founders it would be when we first started. So I think it was more, I didn't see the tech penetration in India reach the extent that I wanted to make our system work, more than it was about me not liking the industry or my team or my company.
Sanjay, can you tell me why do Indian founders go to Y Combinator to, pitch their business idea and start there, and why not just seek investors here? You can be honest.
To be honest with you, I think number one reason about YC, like irrespective of which accelerator would have offered me or not, I would have still only taken YC, even the second time around. And the reason for that is that I know, like the first time I went through YC, my partners were Michael Siebel and Justin Khan. And Justin, for people that don't know, is the founder of Twitch, who sold the company for like $1 billion to Amazon. And when you have office hours, which is where the founder goes to talk to his partner about how to build a business and all, are you going to say no to Justin about what he says about business? I think he knows a thing or two. He walked in your shoes, right? Now we take the typical career structure of an Indian VC without assigning blame, or at the same time, that shouldn't be a defense for them as well. I think a lot of them have management consulting backgrounds, maybe some investment banking background, and you listen to them. And one of the first things that you will think to yourselves is, let's say somebody like the VC has been working at McKinsey before advising Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give to Microsoft that applies to an early stage startup with 2-3 founders? And another way of looking at this is, my team often talks about this big company does this or that big company does this. One of the best ways to kill your company today is to act like the Google of today, right? Doggy daycare, free massages, sleep pods. We don't do that shit at Landeed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not here to baby you or build a old age home for young people, right? India needs a lot of productivity, and we need to accept that India does not have high productivity. Mm-hmm. And that we need to work hard, and we need to use the tools that we've been given to make ourselves even more productive. And when you're more productive, you get more employment and you have better, country future, right? In our case, when we speak with VCs, most of the times it feels very theoretical. For some of the founders, they have a choice, just like investors do, in terms of picking their investors. So India is seen as a very probably labor excess market because we have such a large population. And there weren't that many funders. Mm-hmm. When I came in 2016, 15, when I was looking at the Indian ecosystem, maybe handful of people that you would say is top tier money in India. So I think VCs are kind of used to, perhaps in India, getting their way or like being listened to more. But in order to get a spot on my cap table, you have to add a lot more than money. Mm-hmm. And so when I choose investors, I think about what is it aside from money that they can offer. And a lot of them, like one investor is like, how can I invest? How can I help? Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing an investor can do in India is sign the paper and wire the goddamn money, right? Instead of making the founders chase for it. Mm-hmm. There have been many events where I pitched a VC in the West, and we gave them the data that they need, precisely what they need, answer their questions. And then next thing you know, I'll get a WhatsApp message saying, send me the bank details. And we send that. And they themselves wire and double check with you, hey, have you received the funds? First thing is allowing the founder to work. I've seen clauses in startups that I invested in India where the investor wants to visit the office and has a clause and can take away any paperwork from the office if he or she chooses to do so. Okay. Now, most of the investors that sit on my cap table, even the angels, don't have enough time to visit startup offices and take paperwork and do forensic research, right? And I think there was a time as well where perhaps some Indian investors had a local crop of founders that probably didn't have a more globalized approach or network. And what you found out over time is maybe those Indian investors also, like when, as an Indian founder, I say that there's a white skin arbitrage. Like, there's a bunch of us that go to US and meet with white people and tell them about the India growth story. And we sell them the India growth story to raise money. Then we come to India and lay off people, saying the American economy has slowed down, so the funding sources have slowed down. Okay. Right? So a lot of this is based on that. Now, would we be surprised that Indian VCs are not doing something similar? They're probably going to their LPs and saying, like, look, this is an asset class, India is growing, you got to bet on the India growth story. Mm-hmm. But then when maybe somebody makes some investments locally, and there seems to be a trend of founders failing, then we say the founders have a corporate governance issue, mm-hmm. right? So, and that's a very interesting point about corporate governance. First of all, startup is not a corporate for you to even apply that term. It's paradoxical in nature. And second, if I asked you, uh, what are the most important skill sets of an early stage investor uh, in an early stage startup? I think you and I would both agree that figuring out that founder's character, that personality, and his ability to get work done would be very important to you, right? And culture, right? Now, if those founders are the same ones that are having corporate governance issues later, what does it say about their character? And what does it say about our ability to right size their character?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in an early stage, right, and you're looking at some startup that's having $40,000, MRR,
Mm-hmm.
and another startup having $60,000 MRR, that $20,000 in difference in MRR is probably meaningless at early stage. So that means you should be looking at these startups from the founder team quality and their character and their ability to get shit done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when these founders are going out there repeatedly, sometimes you're having governance issues. You pick that founder. He committed whatever he committed. You were sitting on the board. So where is your responsibility in this, being a custodian of the capital?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the VCs come back to some founders and say, we want our capital back, we're trying to protect our LPs, you're being a custodian of capital. But when you're, blaming the founder when things go bad and taking the credit when things go great,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another issue. And then you also see this in the cap table structures. The amount, like if you look at the cap table structure in terms of employee stock option pools for typical Indian startups, founders, employees, investors. Employees probably have very minimal,
Mm-hmm.
and VCs have a disproportionate amount of the cap table in a lot of Indian startup founders.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you think the founder is going to be close to? Right? And so perhaps some founders get very close to investors. I'm very clear with my founders, with my investors. My first and foremost job is to build this company. And sometimes that means working with you, sometimes disagreeing with you.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I'm putting my ass on the fire 12 to 14 hours a day, every single day of this week and every day in the year to build this company. So when investors feel like they can come in and sometimes teach a lesson on how to operate, I think unless you're a very lazy founder, you should understand quickly if it's a good idea and adopt that, or tell the investor very lightly, hey, like this is not the way. For instance, some of them asked us to do listings.
Mm-hmm.
We will not do listings
Mm-hmm.
now or anytime soon. So that cap table structure, the way incentives are aligned, some founders are very close to some VCs and all of that. I am more, before I'm close to my VCs, I think I have great supporters. I call them stakeholders. I must first be very closest to my customers. So I'm first close to my customers, and I'm then close to my staff, and then it's the investors. I appreciate their support, but they are one of my stakeholders, not my only.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't report to them, right? I have a job. I could be doing other things. I'm glad you supported my dreams and ambitions to build this. And the people that are with me understand that this is the way that I go about building things. And I will continue to build. And I will work every hour that I have to be able to make Landid a success. But if you do not understand that I am not going to be buddy-buddy with you, that my first focus is on building for my customer and my team, and you have a place and you have a time, and I will come to you when I need help. And when I respect you, you can also come to me and speak to me. That builds a lot of trust. My top investors like Oliver Young, who's also an investor in Zepto, or Tim Draper, Michael Siebel invested in us.
Mm-hmm.
Every single investor that was an investor in my institutional investor in Golori has become an investor in Landid.
Okay.
And Golori wasn't a success.
Mm-hmm.
That means that it's a relationship that we built over time.
Mm-hmm.
So irrespective, good or bad, I'll tell you how it is. But there are other things that go along with this, like it's a cultural difference. One thing is sometimes analysts, I'll give an example. I think it was sometimes a associate or a VP that reached out to me and said, "Hey," and we were almost done with our round. And he said, "Sanjay, we'd like to speak to you," and all of that. And I said, "Look, my round is closing at this point in time." And that's another weird, interesting thing, like tactically speaking, that I see. When you tell an Indian VC for some reason that my round is about to close, then they don't believe you. I don't know why.
Okay.
And they also don't believe you when you tell them that I don't want money right now, because I'm either operating or I'm fundraising. I don't do both at the same time. So if I ever raise a check while the time I'm fundraising, it's because it's minimal due diligence and you give the valuation that I want. Otherwise, I am not going to create a new deck and sit down and create new models, all of this, while I'm operating the company. When I'm fundraising, I will spend all the time with you, right? And so they don't believe you when you say, this is when I'm going to raise again, and this is when the round is closed. And they just take it for granted. Then sometimes, somebody else calls in. But so we were telling this associate or VP, and I'd like to speak with a partner. And he's like, "Sanjay, that's not our process. We don't do, partner. We want to make sure it's a good use of his time." And I said, I can't do that because I don't have time and I need to get moving. And I worked on the buy side, so I know who can write checks, right? And so, and he said, "Sanjay, I think it's normal. We really want to talk to you. We're interested in you, in what you're building. We've invested in this space before. Uh, but there's a certain process. We have to do due diligence if somebody, like us is going to drop some money into, and it's not a small amount of money. It's 1 to 2 million, and that's what they said." And so my point was, look, from your perspective, deploying that 1 to 2 million takes a lot of diligence, and in order for you to do that, you need to do that before your partner comes and speaks. Right now, I've already raised 4.5 million. So that same block of time for me is worth $4.5 million of capital that I have to deploy. So if you're not going to be able to make the time and be able to sit with the founder and elaborate why your thesis on this particular market is strong, aside from just your capital, you and I are going to have a very hard time working together, right? And so for me, I know absolutely what I don't want. I'm willing to listen to what I want, but I know there's a certain way that I hold myself up as a man and how I drive my company, and I expect the same from the other person. If regardless of what valuation you give me, I will not accept it unless we have a working rhythm and a frequency that allows me to grow Landeed. Because you will not find me doing secondaries. So you will not find me, you will probably find me investing in my rounds, in my startup. So I'm not out here to make a quick buck and get out. And I think that whole process about how to value founders and how to have that approach makes a difference. You have to ask yourself, why is Razer Pay not first funded by an Indian investor or Zepto or Grow or Misho? Should we keep going? Right? So I think they need to change that, perhaps some attitude about, and bring in more operators. Like, given a choice, a VC being equal, let's say, somehow on paper, and somebody that comes from a certain field offers, investment banking, management consultant, whatever, gives you a 10% higher valuation than the founder operator that has become the, VC. I don't know if I'll guarantee take him, but I would definitely have a second thought, even though it's lower valuation, because I know he's walked in my path. And I know that makes a difference because I've been running startups now for almost a decade. So when I invest today, I'm not investing in the market. I'm not investing in the TAM. I think that's stupid. I'm investing first and foremost in that person's character and that culture. So I only invest in two things today: land and startups, because I think they're not making more of those every day. I really hope that they get some operating experience versus like going and getting some degrees and then saying that we're going to reach out to founders. And the way that they treat founders' time should also be very respectful. It's not uncommon. We had a top tier VC in India, I think, who rescheduled 4 times right after demo day. And like, I don't know how it goes here, but I can tell you when we're telling you that there's already investment commitments and this round is going to get closed, I'm not playing you,
Mm.
right? So, like, if we're being honest, I expect the same thing. Like, we say we're professionals, and suddenly we get into fish market territory, right? I again had an incident where one VC told us we don't pay YC prices. So I'm like, you want to pay local prices for global best talent? Like, I'm not going to devalue myself because you don't want to pay YC prices when I have a market. And so I think what has happened, and I recall this, is the founders now, some of them have a global network. Those same LPs, in the VCs, if you have a relationship, will invest directly within you in India, right? So that same founder will be able to meet some of the same top tier VCs in America. So it is not any longer an India market for some founders. So you need to be able to compete with the best, and you need to be able to show to the founder you have some knowledge and operating expertise in India that is beyond just saying that I have an India special advantage that a white person doesn't understand. I think that's very unfair to Western VCs that sit there and deploy capital to many of these startups. Because why is it that we don't accept that they can be just as good at investing in India as much as all these Indians go and become successful at tech in US? I have a white co-founder. I can tell you that he knows more about titling system in India now than most top tier lawyers do. So I think we should use India as an identity and not as a fundraising hack. So yeah.
So that's a very detailed explanation. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Just one last question on so for these new age founders that are planning to break into the complexities, cater to the Indian market, what advice would you give them?
I think one of the most important things about India is that learn to work from the ground up. Um, I think we are taught to model the world a lot. Uh, I think the founder and market fit is really important, but in a different way. I think one of the most underrated qualities in India for a founder is probably courage. And understanding that sometimes you get pressure from all sorts of sides that you don't understand, um, and being able to deal with it is very important. And you never know where that's going to come from. And so sense of paranoia always persists around you about who you can trust, who you cannot, who you speak to, and who you cannot. But I would say that always learn to build from the ground up. Do not have a model that you think this is how India works. That's not how it's done. Um, when you see a product or a document on Landeed that's been put on there, we don't put something on that app until we've been able to fulfill and acquire that document offline first. That's a test. So how we structure the product is a lot to do with our offline learning from our field experiences. The way to build in India is to learn from the field. It is not to learn from what has worked in other countries and try to replicate a software layer back here. The people are very different, and they are different by state by state. So the first thing I would do if I come to India is I wouldn't touch a computer. I would go around on a scooter or an auto to the places where I want to think about improving that industry. If I'm thinking about farming, I would work on the fields for 2 3 days to understand. As an example, in trucking, I traveled with a truck driver for 8 days in his truck before we started working on the company. And I think that's been really, really powerful. We built very driver friendly solutions because of it, because we understood it. And second thing is have courage. A lot of people will try to pressure you, uh, try to move you in certain directions. I think if you know what you stand for and you're clear on it and you have a playbook and you write them down, then you'll be able to withstand pressure. I think we have people that work with bureaucrats and governments and other types of people. And one of the dangers is you can end up becoming and picking up some of the worst aspects of another industry if you spend too much time with them. So that's why we train them in-house. All of them come to Hyderabad, get trained before we send them out, and then we recall them every 1 or 2 months to come and spend time with the office. That cultural centering is very important. And I discovered this another way. I found that somebody who comes from UP has a very different way of thinking about work than somebody that comes from West Bengal and somebody that comes from Tamil Nadu. And so India doesn't have a homogenous work culture. And so what I had to do for that is I literally had to create a document called Working with Sanjay. And I said, this is how we work at Landeed. We work hard. If you see some Western company offering some benefits, or you watch some Netflix show or Amazon show and you think this is how America or Europe actually is, I think you'd be very wrong, because I don't think a typical American watches a Bollywood movie and thinks that's how India is. So we cannot take all the things that we see in the Western world and try to apply them to India if you're not going to take all the efficiencies of the Western world and apply them to India. There's this notion that work-life balance is important. In India, you cannot have it if you're an early stage startup founder.
Okay.
You see the benefits for the American employee, but you will not notice that, when we were in investment banking in US or a startup founder, it was not unusual to be working every Saturday, Sunday, or pulling all-nighters. And, writing exams and getting good grades on them shouldn't be the hardest thing you ever did in India. It should be what comes after that. So work ethic is understated, but extremely important, particularly in the Indian context. We have to be better as founder CEOs in the online world than our Western counterparts that are in India. I have to be better than the traditional Indian businessmen that operate in the offline world in India. So I would say the two particular positions in India that definitely have to be better than global standards is, one is politicians and the second is startup founders. So, but yeah, I would say those three things.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjay, for your time. This has
Yep.
truly been insightful.
Thanks.
For all the talk about AI and disruption, Landeed's story is a reminder that innovation in India is often less about building shiny new tech and more about navigating decades-old paperwork, fragmented systems, and deeply human problems. As Sanjay said, in real estate, lineage matters. And sometimes the biggest challenge isn't building the tech, but making it work with everything that came before it. That's all for this episode of Point Break, where we go beyond the hype and dive into the hard truths of building in India. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and think AI, think AIM.